My name is George. I am 23 years old and I'm currently a third-year medical student at Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. On the surface, it might look like I am on my way toward the dream I've carried since childhood. Wearing a white coat, working in a hospital, saving lives. But beneath that image, my reality is much darker. I have spent many nights lying awake on a thin mattress in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing so fast I thought it might burst. And the reason wasn't a difficult anatomy exam or a complicated patient case. It was simply the question, do I have enough money to eat for the next 3 days? I grew up in a modest neighborhood. My parents were immigrants who arrived in the United States with almost nothing but determination. They worked long hours in a small family-owned restaurant. My father in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, washing dishes, sweating in the heat of the stoves. My mother at the counter, smiling at customers even when her back ached and her feet swelled from standing all day. From them, I learned the value of hard work, but I also saw how fragile money could be. Some of my earliest memories are of sitting in the restaurant after school, doing homework at a sticky table while the scent of fried food and spices filled the air. My mother would glance at me between serving customers, reminding me softly, "Study hard, George. One day you'll have a better life." My father often echoed the same message, though his tone carried both pride and desperation. "You must do what we cannot. You must go further." I carried those words with me through middle school and high school. Whenever I felt tired, I pictured my parents' tired faces. Becoming a doctor wasn't just my dream. It was a promise I made to myself and to them. When I was accepted into medical school, I thought the hardest part was behind me. I imagined stepping into a bright future wearing the white coat ceremony badge of honor, holding my head high as my parents cried tears of joy in the audience. And that day really was beautiful. My mother clapped until her palms were red. My father kept adjusting his phone to record everything, and I felt like their sacrifices had finally paid off. But reality hit hard within just a few months. Tuition alone was nearly minus $60,000 per year. Add to that thousands more for textbooks, medical instruments, lab coats, and exam fees. Rent in East Lansing was about $750 a month. For the small apartment I shared with my roommate Jacob. Then came food, utilities, health insurance, transportation, and my phone bill. The numbers stacked up like a mountain I couldn't climb. My parents wanted to help, but the restaurant barely covered their own living expenses. They managed to send me small amounts now and then, $50 here, $100 there. But compared to the thousands I needed, it felt like trying to put out a wildfire with a cup of water. The rest I had to cover through student loans and part-time work. I found a job at a local diner, working as a waiter, and sometimes helping in the kitchen. At first I told myself it was manageable, 20 to 25 hours a week on top of my classes. But medical school isn't like other programs. It's relentless. Hours of lectures each day, endless reading, anatomy labs where I had to memorize every tiny detail of the human body, and exams that determined whether you stayed afloat or sank. After a late shift at the diner, I would drag myself back home around midnight, smelling of grease and coffee. My hands were rough from scrubbing dishes, my feet sore from carrying trays, and my brain numb from constant small talk with customers. Yet I still had to open my textbooks. Sometimes I would sit at my desk, highlighter in hand, but my eyelids would grow heavy. I'd wake up hours later, face pressed against the open book, pages crinkled with drool. Jacob, my roommate, often joked, "Man, you're turning into a zombie. You need sleep more than another shift." I laughed it off, but inside I knew he was right. The cruelest part was the constant anxiety about money. Every buzz from my phone announcing a bank notification made my stomach twist. More often than not, my balance hovered in the double digits. $45, $27, $12.74. Sometimes, after paying my credit card bill late, it slipped into the negative. The overdraft fees felt like salt on an open wound. I cut corners wherever possible. I bought instant noodles in bulk, hunted for pizza discounts, and sometimes relied on leftovers from the diner. I hated admitting it, but yes, there were nights when I hoped a customer wouldn't finish their fries so I could box them up and eat them later. It was humiliating, but it meant saving $5 or $10. In winter, Jacob and I kept the thermostat as low as possible to shave $30 off the electricity bill. We wore layers of sweaters, buried ourselves under blankets, and still shivered through the night. I rarely slept more than 4 or 5 hours. Even when I had the chance, my mind wouldn't rest. Numbers raced through my thoughts like flashing red lights. Rent due in 5 days, bank balance 3800, next paycheck in 2 days. Will it be enough? I'd toss and turn, imagining scenarios of being evicted, failing exams, or having to drop out. Friends sometimes invited me to the movies or out for dinner. I usually made excuses about being too busy studying. The truth was, I couldn't spare the $15 or $20 for a night out. Over time, the invitations came less frequently. People assumed I was simply too focused on school, and in a way, I let them believe that. It was easier than admitting I was broke. But the isolation gnawed at me. I missed laughing freely, eating at restaurants without counting every dollar, or even just buying a cup of coffee without guilt. Instead, I withdrew further, hiding my struggles behind a mask of determination. One night, around 2 in the morning, I sat alone in the university library. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, casting harsh shadows on the textbooks spread out across my desk. My anatomy exam was just days away, and I needed to memorize entire sections of muscles, nerves, and blood vessels. But my mind was elsewhere. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank account. Balance: $12.74. The numbers blurred as tears filled my eyes. Just then, my phone lit up again. It was my mother calling on FaceTime. She appeared on screen with her familiar warm smile. "George, are you eating well? Are you taking care of yourself?" she asked. I swallowed hard, forcing a nod. "Yes, Mom, I'm fine." She beamed, relieved. When the call ended, I broke down. Silent sobs shook my body until I buried my face in my hands. For the first time, I truly wondered, should I just give up? Would quitting spare me years of crushing debt? Would I ever dig myself out of the hole I was digging with student loans and credit cards? The fear was worse than any exam. Eventually, I made an appointment with the university counselor. Sitting in that small office, I felt exposed, ashamed to admit I couldn't handle my life. I expected judgment, but instead, she listened patiently. After I poured out my fears, she leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. "George, money is important, but it does not define your worth. If you let financial anxiety consume you, it will steal not just your joy, but also your strength to move forward." That was the turning point. For the first time, I realized I wasn't powerless. I started making small changes. I created a detailed budget, tracking every dollar. I set aside a notebook just for expenses, writing down even the tiniest purchases. Seeing everything in black and white gave me a sense of control. Jacob helped me brainstorm ways to save more. Carpooling to campus, cooking meals together, splitting grocery bills more evenly. I also experimented with side gigs that were less physically exhausting than waiting tables, tutoring underclassmen in biology, editing essays online, and even doing occasional freelance translation work. The pay wasn't huge, but it added up without draining all my energy. Most importantly, I learned to reach out. I confided in a few friends about my situation, and instead of pity, I found understanding. One friend began sharing her notes with me when I missed classes due to work. Another invited me over for dinner without making me feel like a charity case. Stress didn't disappear overnight, but it stopped devouring me whole. Slowly, I began to breathe again. I am still deep in debt. I still don't live comfortably, but I no longer let the numbers in my bank account control my spirit. Each morning I remind myself, I am on a path to becoming a doctor. This road is brutal, but it is not hopeless. I think often of my parents, still working in the restaurant, still sacrificing so I can chase this dream. I think of my younger sister who looks up to me, and I think of the patients I will one day serve, people who may need not only my medical skills but also my empathy. Empathy born from struggle. I know I'm not alone. Across America, thousands of students are drowning in the same fears, lying awake at night wondering if they can afford their next meal or next semester. To anyone who feels trapped in that cycle, you are not alone and you are not worthless. There are ways forward even if they're slow and painful. So I share my story not to complain, but to reach out. If you've ever lain awake with your heart pounding because of money, if you've ever skipped meals or lied to your parents so they wouldn't worry, I want you to know, I understand. And if you've found little tricks or coping strategies, share them, because maybe your story will help someone else feel less alone. Have you ever lost sleep over money? What got you through it? Let's talk about it, because sometimes just knowing someone else understands can make the load feel lighter. If this story resonated with you, don't just scroll away. Like this video if you've ever felt the weight of financial stress. Share your own story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've coped. Send this to a friend who might need to know they're not alone. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about student life, struggle, and resilience.